excellent young scientists that will present their work on glucagon resistance. And yeah, I wouldn't say it's the highlight of this conference to me, but at least it's one of them. So I'm very excited to hear their talk. So I will just talk briefly about glucagon resistance from a historical perspective, but also from some more recent data. But first, I'm so lucky that we already had actually an introduction to the liver alpha cell axis. But I will just shortly walk you past it. So here we see the pancreas, where we have the alpha cells that secretes glucagon, and we have the liver, and on the hepatocytes we have a glucagon receptor. One thing you need to be aware of is that there is a zonation in the liver. So that means a lot of the metabolic effect, glucose, gluconeogenesis, ureagenesis, and some of the things we heard about and will hear about is actually is located in different areas within the liver. And the question is, if you have NAFLD or obesity or whatever, does that zonation, is that impacted on that? And that is actually an open question mark, I would say. But the majority of research for the last 100 years has really focused on glucose, and we heard very nice talk about Anders Tengholm yesterday about how glucose is regulating glucagon secretion. But you can see there are some other aspects here of the liver alpha cell axis beside of glucose, and I guess you can guess them. Do you know what the two others are? Could I hear some guess? Now, you didn't manage the glucagon quiz last night, so I just need to hear if you've been practicing. Okay, so one of them is amino acids, right? And the idea here is, which we heard from Daniel Dean as well, that certain amino acids stimulates glucagon secretion, and we believe that glucagon has a both non-transcriptional, that means acute effect on amino acid catabolism, as well as more long-term transcriptional factors, amino acid uptakes and ureagenesis and what have you. And I think a very exciting area, that is lipid metabolism and glucagon. And congratulations to Katrine Galsgaard, who won the poster awards, because her poster is actually about lipids and glucagon. So it appears that there is a strong effect of glucagon on lipids, and I think that's also have some clinical implications when we talk about the dual agonist, because is that really what the glucagon component is contributing to in the reported trials? So you could also tell the liver alpha cell axis in a different way. It's a physiological feedback loop by which glucose, amino acid, and lipid metabolism is controlled by glucagon-dependent mechanism, and glucagon secretion is controlled by these three components. So that is some of the fields that we and other groups in the world are working on. So this was really an effort by multiple groups. Some of them have been here. You heard about Daniel Dean's study. You also heard a bit about our study. So it's many groups who has been working with the liver alpha cell axis. Going a bit back in time, I think this was actually after a meeting, wasn't it, Jens, in Oxford or something like that, where you guys managed to write this Insulin and Glucagon Partners for Life. Isn't that a beautiful title? I think it really is. And the question is this really true? But I don't know. We can have a discussion about that. But for sure, there is a close relationship between insulin and glucagon. The question is, how much do we actually know about insulin versus glucagon resistance? I guess most of you have heard about insulin resistance. That's sort of printed all over. You cannot really open a PubMed search without insulin resistance somewhere in the title or the abstract or within the exact paper. So if you PubMed insulin resistant, you get 140,000 hits. So, and just think about, before I will show you the data, how many hits do you think there are on glucagon resistant? You can just think about that and then give me a number. I don't have any present, but... So insulin resistance is very closely related to liver fat, obesity, and NAFL, and it's been, very precisely defined. It's an inability of a known quantity of exogenous or endogenous insulin to increase glucose uptake, right, compared to our normal populations. So, and there's this cookie, and insulin resistance is associated with whatever dementia and diabetes, obviously, and a lot of other things. Glucagon resistance. So how many hits? Any ideas? 10, 100, thousands, 100 thousands? 100? Higher, lower? Okay, 100. 35. Okay, and the recent one is actually by Katrine, who's sitting here. So you can see that there is a huge gap in the literature about glucagon resistance if we compare it to insulin resistance. So I think that's a very exciting field. The question is it right? But we will hear about that from the three researchers. So if we go a bit back into the literature, so this is what I have been able to find. It might be there's earlier studies, and I think that Patrick Gelong and Katrine Galsgaard, who got the Glucagon Bible, can perhaps tell us about when after they have read the Bible, the Glucagon Bible, about this. So this was the first study in patients with cirrhosis, and what they did were comparing arginine-induced indirect measures. By infusing arginine, they had increased glucagon levels, and they measured then glucose. And this is the first graph here on your left side. You can see these have a normal liver. There are healthy controls. And on the right side should probably be another figure, but these patients have cirrhosis. So you can clearly see if you put a red line here that there's a difference between arginine stimulated glucose production, and they thought that this was related to the first concept, as they called it, glucagon resistance. But this was towards glucose. So this is something you will hear a bit differently about in a few minutes. And I think a major problem is in the field is how to define it and how to measure glucagon resistance. So is it a known quantity of exogenous or endogenous? So the endogenous glucagon, this is just what I've showed you with the arginine stimulants, to increase glucose, or is it also to lower amino acids and to lower triglycerides? So that's sort of the three components of the liver alpha cell axis.